Hello, welcome to the CSS section of our beginner's guide. In the last video, we had a look at the position property, which basically allowed us to specify where our elements should be positioned. And in this video, we will have a look at another really important property that you should understand when you want to work on the style of your website, the display property. Now, in contrast to the position property, which allowed us to position the elements, the display property allows us to change the way our elements are displayed on our website. Now, if that might not sound totally clear for you right now, no problem. We'll have a look at that in this video. So let's think about the following example. You have your website with an HTML element and a body element. Inside this body element, you have a header element and other elements. This could be a main element, a footer, anything like that. Just think about these elements as the general parts of your website, which are positioned correctly as we learned it in the last video. So basically, you are happy with the core structure. The problem is that although these elements are positioned correctly, the way the elements that are nested inside these different elements might not be according to your needs. Let's think about two divs, for example, right here in this element. These two divs are by default block level elements. We also talked about that in the HTML part of the series. And as block level elements, well, they behave the way we see it right here. The problem might now be, although this HTML code is totally fine, the default display option we see right here is not the one that you want to have in CSS. Therefore, we need a way to change the way our elements are displayed. And that's exactly what the display property is doing. Because with the display property, we are able to apply different values and by that different displaying options to our elements. Now, what does this mean? Well, basically, we can apply a block value. Well, wouldn't change a lot for the div apparently. We could apply inline. This is more interesting, right? We could also apply inline-block. Sounds even more interesting. And we could apply none, for example. Also something we'll take a look at in this video. Now, we also have a lot more values available actually. It's not just these four. And this brings us to the question, before we dive deeper into the values, where can I find more information about these values? And again, the answer is in the MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network, right here. Because on this page, a link can be found in the video description, of course, you can see that we have lots of different values available for our display property. For example, block and inline right here. Now, we will focus onto block, inline, inline-block, and none in this video. But there is one additional value I would like to bring your attention to. And this value is this one right here, display flex. This is a really cool and a really helpful value, and therefore we'll have a look at that in a separate video. As I said, in this video, we'll focus onto these four values, block, inline, inline-block, and none. Now, that was a lot of theory actually, and again I think the best way to see what these values are doing is to have a look at it at a practical example. Now let's do this. And for this example, I use this really basic code actually. You can find it in the video description also. So we have an HTML file with a header, a nav, and a main element. And inside our main element, we have three divs. We also have a style file again with some basic styling applied to make sure that, well, we can see some important information on our page. Talking about the page looks like this with the open Chrome developer tools right here. And as you can see, I kind of recreated the situation we had on the slide with our HTML element in the orange part, then we have the yellow part, the body, and we have the header, the nav, and the main element right here. And inside the main element, we have the three divs. Now, that's the standard situation, and everything is displayed with the default display property being applied. For the divs, and actually for all these elements right here, this is block level. Now let's change this and see what we can do with the display property. Now let's go back. And for that, we should go down right here to our div. And now I will simply write display right here and start with display block like that. Won't change a thing, just save that. And let's go back and reload the page. And as you can see, nothing changed, of course. Because, as I said before, with this display property, we are able to change the way our element is displayed. And if you apply the value of block to a block level element, well, not a lot changes. There is one important thing, though, that I would bring to your mind. And this is that with block level elements, we can do the following. We can write width, like that, and maybe type 100 pixels. By the way, width and height and pixels and percentages, all that topics will be covered in another video of this series. So we'll just stick to width and height and pixels in this videos. If you're not sure about how this works, as I said, no worries, we'll talk about that also throughout this series. But for now, let's just apply width 100 pixels right here and save that. If we now go back and reload the page, you can see that the width of our element changed. And that's interesting to know, because for block level elements, we can change the width and the height, for example. If we go back now and delete display block, or just comment it out maybe, this and like that, save that, and go back and reload the page, you can see the width is still applied. So keep that in mind. With block level elements, we can do this. Going back to our code, and now commenting that in again, we can now change the value to inline, like that. If we save that, go back and reload the page, well, we can now see that our elements are displayed as inline elements. And therefore, we changed the default way these block level elements are displayed. And that can be really helpful, right? Because you might want to have these divs displayed like that, but you don't want to change the initial HTML file and the way the elements are created right there. And therefore, display inline, or also vice versa. So if you have inline elements right here and you apply display block to them, this would also work, of course. Well, this would allow you to change the default displaying behavior of that element. But the interesting thing is that our width 100 pixels declaration apparently wasn't applied right here. If we go back and maybe change it to 200, save that, go back and reload the page, you can see nothing changes. And that's also important to understand, because the height and the width of such inline elements cannot be changed. Also an important difference to the block level elements we saw before. So if you want to change the width of such inline elements, well, you simply cannot do that. That's wrong, of course. We have a way how to also change the width and the height, for example, of such inline elements. How can we do that? Well, if we go back to our code and now change the way it is displayed from inline to inline block right here and save that, then we can go back and reload the page. And we can see that we now turned this initial block level element, this div, into an inline element. And with inline block, we are then able to change the width of that, well, now inline element. And that's really cool, because with that, we have really powerful tools in CSS which allow us to style the elements just the way we want them to be. Of course, feel free to play around with these values and see what else you can do with them. But that's just the basic core concept that, at least that I think, is important to understand. Now, before we apply that display property now to our website, there is one last value that I would like to show you. And this value is display none. So if we change it right here to none, save the page and go back, then you can see nothing. Because with display none, we can simply make sure that our elements are not displayed anymore. Now, this is something we won't use right now in our project, but this can be really helpful, especially when you add JavaScript to your website. JavaScript will also be covered later throughout this series, therefore, for the moment, we will not use display none and simply stick to display inline block, maybe for our example. And as you can see, now everything looks the way it looked before. So that was the theory, that was the basic thing you have to understand regarding the display property. And I think now is the time to go back to our website and see what we can change right there. So here we are, back in our code. You can of course also find the code or the link to the code down there in the video description. The important thing now is that if we look at our page right here, Well, our page needs some more style, and we should use the display property to apply that style. And let's focus onto this nav bar, because we talked about the header in the last video. So in this nav element right here, we can see that the way it is displayed right now is not the best one probably. Because I would like to have home and context being written next to each other, and it should also be centered, so like Mike's world up here. Now let's change that by going back to our code, and I'm back in the index.html file, and right here we could add a class right here to this list, and this class could be navigation. Of course, feel free to name it just as you prefer. Let's save that, and let's now go to our style sheet, and here we have the nav element right there, or the nav section that we created. So let's now type navigation right here, and that's the class, that's fine, but specifically we don't want to refer or select the class, we want to refer to the elements inside that class. And if we now add a space and type li for the list elements, then we specifically refer to the list elements we have inside this navigation class that we just created. Now let's add the curly braces, and let's now add display, and maybe let's start with inline, like that. Now if we save that and go back and reload the page, yes, we can see that our elements, well, look better. But if we inspect that now, yeah, we can see, I think it's hard to see, but you can see it if you read the pixels. You can see that contact has a width of about 50 pixels, and home only has a width of around about 39 pixels. That's of course due to the fact that both are displayed as inline elements now. So we should change that and maybe change inline to inline block, like that, and also apply a width of maybe, let's say, 70 pixels. Let's save that. Let's go back. And if we reload that, yeah, we can see that now the list right here has a width of 70 pixels, and the second list element also has a width of 70 pixels. The problem still is that we don't only have the list elements right there, because if we go back to our index.html file, you can see that we have the class navigation that we refer to right here. Then we have the list item, totally fine for home. But inside the second list element, we have this anchor tag right there. And this can cause issues, because if we now have a specific definition for this anchor tag, this would override the rule that we just defined for the list items in the navigation class. Let me show you what I mean by that. If I go back to style CSS and now go right here to the anchor tag right here, and now apply a background color of red, for example, like that. And if I now go down to our navigation list right here, I will apply a background color, background color like that, of yellow, like that. And now let's see what happens. If we go back and reload the page, we can see that home is of course with that yellow background color as we defined it for the list elements inside the navigation class, but contact, well, is not with that yellow background color because it is applied for the list element. But as we have this anchor tag inside this second list element, we have the problem that the anchor tag, as it is a more specific element, is displayed with that red background color that we defined. And this might cause issues on your websites as we are not, well, specific enough or precise enough. Now, how can we change that? Well, a really easy way to change it is if we go back, and now don't only say navigation list, but also say that this style should be true for navigation A, like that. This means we now want to apply this style to all list elements inside the navigation class and also to all anchor tags right here inside the navigation class. And this is important. If you would write it like this, then you would say that you apply this style to the list elements in the navigation class and to all anchor tags. That's not good because you only want to apply that to a specific anchor tag. Therefore, make sure to add the class in front of the element. Now, if we save this and go back and reload the page, then you can see it didn't work because I forgot to add the dot right here. Now we have the class. And if you now reload the page, then you can see that it works perfectly because with that specific, let's maybe unselect the inspect tool, sorry, because with that specific definition now of the anchor tag inside the navigation class, we made sure that our styling now is fine. And with that, we can also see that the anchor tag is styled like that. And the list item is also styled like that. So basically we have the list item right here, the list element right here, and the anchor tag right there. So with that, we have the basic style of turning that into an inline block element applied, but I still would like to center these two elements now, just as Mike's World. For that, we should go back, and now we need to add a new rule, because the thing is that this centering part should not refer to the single elements right here, but it should refer to the entire navigation class right there, like this. And now we write text align center, like that. If we save that, we did that already in the last video, therefore I'm doing it a little bit faster now. So if you go back and reload that, and with that, let's inspect that, we now centered the element with the class navigation right here. There is one issue though, you can see it right here. We have some padding applied, so let's get rid of that padding also by writing padding 0 right there. Save that. Now reload it. Now it's centered, but I think we also have an issue right here in Mike's World actually. Yeah, it's the same issue. We have some padding here in the page title class. So let's also change this quickly by adding a padding of 0 right there. So this is the padding to the left and to the right. And if you now reload that, yes, now we can see, if we unselect the inspect tool, that we were able to center this list actually, which is pretty cool as I think. Let's maybe also change the background color we have right here from this yellow to, well, I don't know, let's maybe use this darker gray. Let's see what this looks like this. Yeah, looks better. We are still not done with the style right here, but regarding the display property, I think this is fine. Now let's continue to the main element. So specifically right here, my SF city trip, California landscape, and the images. Because that's also not displayed the way I would like it to be. Because actually it should be like my SF city trip right here in this part. Then there should be the image of the San Francisco streets right there. And then I would like to have the California landscape right here in this part of the page. And below that text, I would like to have the image of the California streets. So this image should be somewhere, I don't know, right here maybe. Now let's also change that. So let's go back to the code. And what we have to do is we have to work on these. So the trip text and the trip text P mainly. Because if we go to index.html, we can see that our trip text, this class right here, refers to these two paragraphs. And trip images refers to the images. So let's focus on to the text first by going back right here. And now adding display, like that. But we will immediately add inline block right here, because we want to specify a width for these elements. So let's maybe specify a width, but this time not with pixels, but with a percentage. So we will use 50%. We will talk about the details regarding pixels and percentages, height and width later throughout the series. For the moment, we will just apply it like this. And the only thing you have to know right now is that with this width 50%, we will simply say that our elements, so each element right here, should have 50% of the width of this element right here, of our trip text class. So again, in simple words, each paragraph inside our trip text class, so this and this paragraph, should occupy 50% of the space or of the width of this trip text class. Now, what we can see already is that we have some padding right here, so we should get rid of that also. So let's say that we don't want this padding anymore of trip text right here. And with that, we should actually be fine. So let's save that and go back right here and reload the page. Yeah, and we are unfortunately not fine. Because what's the issue? Well, as I said, I would like to have this element, well, right here and not below my SF city trip. Now the problem is that if we look at the trip text class again, we can see that this has 741.14, so 742 pixels of width. And each element has exactly 50% of this total width. So actually, this should work. The problem is that if you apply inline-block as a value for the display property, then there is kind of a gap added automatically between the different elements. So in our case, between my SF city trip and California landscape, you cannot see this gap, but it's there. And because of that, well, we cannot display it next to each other with inline-block. Therefore, we need another solution. Now, there is not just one alternative, actually. One alternative would be to turn the paragraphs right here into list items. Then this would work, but I don't want to do that right now because I want to show you the flex value in the next video. I talked about that in the beginning, but with using value flex right here, and by that using the so-called flex box, we can easily solve this issue and additionally also easily change the way our images are displayed. And because of that, we will keep our main element, so this right here, this part, the two images, and also to people like my page, the way it is right now in this video. But as soon as we know how Flexbox works, we will quickly and easily change the way these elements are displayed. Now, having said that, let's scroll down and maybe unselect the inspect tool again and see what else we can change. And yes, I think this is something we should also work on now, because I would like to change the way this image and this text is displayed, because the text should be next to the image. So this text here should be next to Mac's image. This text here should be next to my image. Now, how can we do that? Well, we can go back to our code and now go down to the footer. By the way, this is wrong. This is feedback. So feedback is actually this part right here, which is actually part of the main element, as you can see it. So we should add that right here. Doesn't have an issue or an impact on the way it is displayed. I just want to keep that a little bit or as structured as possible. But now coming back to our text that we have, because if we go to the HTML file, we can see that our text here, right here, and our image is basically wrapped into a div. And the same thing is true for my image and my text. So let's first apply a class right here, and let's call it class, maybe review clients, something like that. Oops, like that. And now simply use that class and also add that class to that second div, like that. Because that's also important to know. Equal classes can be applied to different elements. That's not an issue. That can be done easily in CSS and is also a big help when you work on bigger websites. The important thing is that IDs, which is also an attribute you can add to an element, can only be applied once. That's really important. But for classes, working like this is possible and easy to do. Now we have that class review clients, and now we have to go to our CSS file, of course, and add that class right here. So let's call it review clients. But what now? Because review clients, well, let's maybe save that first and also save that index.html file. Because review clients, if we reload that, well, here you can see the class. These classes are now again basically only the containing elements, as we could call them. But I want to change the way these two elements, so the image and the paragraph, behave. Now, how can we do this? Well, we talked about that a few minutes ago in the navigation part, because we can again simply go to our CSS file and now not select the entire class, but specifically the paragraph. And again, and by the way, I made a mistake right here. This should be review clients, sorry for that. and review clients again. Now, don't forget to add the class name once again, and now add the second element, which is an image, like that. If we do this now and apply display inline, because we don't need to change the height or the width, so we can apply display inline for the moment, go back right here and reload the page, we can see that it looks better. Still, I would like to have the text, well, being more like there. So we should go back and now simply add vertical align right here, middle, like that, to our two elements. Then, this is also a new property we didn't use so far. We can see that if we reload the page, that both elements now align in the middle or to the middle of their containing element, basically. Well, and with that, if I unselect the inspect tool again, we can see that our page again got a little bit more beautiful. Still a lot of work though, but the important thing is that you now have a better understanding, or hopefully have a better understanding of the display property and how you can use it on your website to make sure that you're able to control the way your elements are displayed on the website. So in the next video, we will have a look at Flexbox, as I said before, and work on the main part, especially right here and right there with the images. Really cool, actually. I'm looking forward to that video, to be honest, and I hope you do the same. And until then, I can only say thanks a lot for watching. Hope to see you there. Bye.